Your Creative Push, episode 151.
If there is to be an audience member that you're creating, whatever it is you're creating for, if there is to be that kind of a person, let it just be yourself.
Hey, and welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I am your host, Youngman Brown, and today's episode is part 2 of my conversation with Martin Wittfooth. If you missed part 1, you can head to yourcreativepush.com/150, that's 150, or you can just scroll back in your podcast player on your phone, because you should be subscribed already, people, and listen to that episode. We left off yesterday talking about goals and also having fun with your art. Something that a lot of people sometimes leave by the wayside. So we are going to jump right back into the conversation right where we left off with Martin Wittfooth. Enjoy and be inspired.
But I think if somebody can just free up even a couple of hours in the evening or something, and to kind of trust this one main instinct, which is this thing that one wants to do, is it fun? Because if it stops feeling like play, then it's probably not worth doing, you know? It'll feel frustrating at times, but, you know, I think things that do challenge a person, it's just that the rewards are that much greater afterwards. And at the end of the day, you know, like who has ever played a game, let's say even something as stupid as Monopoly, who has ever played like a silly board game with no stakes on the table? I think that having just a little bit of an element in there of, whatever one gets into, like it does matter, but being able to pull back enough to say that at the same time, like it's not the outcome that matters, it's the actual process of doing it. Again, hopefully that makes some sense, but.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think there is a fine line between kind of having goals, like having like goals of what you want to accomplish with your art, or with whatever your creative passion is, and then also having fun with it. And kind of, I think when you're in the process, like you're saying, when you're taking that hour, those 2 hours to be with it, it's almost like ignoring all those goals and just trying to have fun and really get to the heart of it. Because if you're thinking about, oh, I need to create this many paintings today, or this many songs today, or this many short stories, or whatever it is, it's like you just get in your head and you start thinking about that and not getting as honest as you can be with your art.
Yeah, it's funny that there's like a certain like curse to the two, when if somebody quote unquote sort of makes it in whatever they're pursuing. What's funny is that there can be an unexpected kind of like side effect, which is not a good one, which is all of a sudden somebody gets too busy and too sort of bogged down by deadlines and these kind of expectations from the outside world, that all of a sudden maybe it can rob them of the purity that brought them to the artwork in the first place. So that's something just to be mindful of, that, like, you know, if somebody's just kind of pursuing it initially from like a hobby level, is to kind of just to take note in how much pleasure they're getting just from doing whatever that thing is that they want to do. And also then to be reminded that, hey, if this thing was the only thing they were ever doing, it could get cumbersome, because then it comes with all this other extra baggage. I often think of like a band that makes it big and all of a sudden they're touring for like 3 years straight. And sure, it would probably be like fun, but time and again you kind of come across these instances of bands kind of making it too big for their own bridges, and all of a sudden, are they in love with making music anymore? You know, often that's not the case anymore. So it's just sort of like these cautionary tales of I'm trying to remember, like, whatever it is that one wants to do artistically, to just keep the idea in mind that it should always retain that sort of element of freedom and fun for as long as one can do that, you know.
Absolutely. It's a fine line, but it's something that you, I guess, learn from experience. And yeah, if it turns into this thing where you're burning yourself out, where you're not looking forward to that 1 hour or 2 hours of like sacred time, you know, right, with you and your art, then maybe figure something else out. Figure out a way to pivot that to make it fun again and to take the pressure off.
Exactly.
So with your art being so closely like intertwined with what you believe in, just your life in general, I was wondering, what does your art and your creativity bring to your life?
The element of surprise. This is something that I have to say that, like, taking the artistic route has kind of afforded me is not knowing. There's sometimes, I can quote unquote know that I have, let's say, a show in a few months and I'm working towards that, but the process getting there, like, I never quite know what paintings are going to come out of my studio and all that kind of stuff. But there's a whole lot of sort of unexpected Easter eggs of what Terrence McKenna, this psychedelic philosopher, used to call novelty. There's a lot of, with an artistic career, it has the propensity for a lot of novelty, as it were. Like, all of a sudden, like, just opportunities to work with bands for album covers, or just shows that one gets invited to take part in places in the world that I'd like to visit, but now I have a reason to go. All that kind of stuff that comes with it is actually quite a big part of what makes it so fun.
I couldn't agree more. And even from this podcast, I've had a lot of novelty happen, opportunities that come up, and you just never really know exactly where the path is going to lead you. It's just a matter of just starting, especially if you haven't started on the journey yet, and then just seeing what happens and being open to it, I think, is really important too, to those novelties that McKenna talks about. And I fucking love Terrence McKenna.
Yeah. It's funny, my next show that I have coming up is called the Archaic Revival, based on his concept and book on that concept. So. Oh,
really? That's what the show's about?
Yeah. It's totally, it's in my own way, kind of, it's, it comes down to 12 paintings and a couple of sculptures. So it's not exactly some opus on it, but it's, all the paintings are meditations in their own way on that topic, and how I feel like that's being reflected in many ways in how our society is going as we're moving towards sort of like a higher tech future. Yeah, because it's really interesting. He wrote that, I think, in was it late 80s or 90s is when he wrote that book, and he lectured about it extensively too. But I just feel like if he was still alive today, he'd have a ball just kind of looking at the various ways by which the Archaic Revival is happening, including dietary things that people are switching to. And, like Joe Rogan's podcast, he's got so many guests on there, and so many topics revolve around this idea of, like, how can we get more into dialogue with the nature, that it's not that we come into it, we come out of it. We are the nature around us that we've, as a species, for a long time marginalized and kind of severed our connection with, but I feel like in so many different ways, including, a lot of psychedelics coming into play, and just the way that people are changing their lifestyles to follow this principle. I think that, this idea of the Archaic Revival is simply one of not returning to being hunter-gatherers, but to open our awareness to the idea that for us to continue as a species in harmony with the world, we have to start with ourselves. We got to start with opening up ourselves so as to be able to contribute properly to that possibly becoming a reality for everyone around us. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff that I see happening that I feel it's a ripe time to join that conversation.
Absolutely. And a big way for us to kind of communicate with ourselves about it is through podcasts like Rogan. That podcast changed my life. It's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, and it also just changed the way I think about everything.
Yeah.
And McKenna as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's just the thing. Like, think about just even the medium by which we're communicating right now. Like, just something as simple as if you think of, like, two people having a conversation. In Rogan's case, it's often 3 hours.
Ridiculous.
So that's so unheard of in the 90s. I mean, you would have to have, for you to reach any number of people, you'd have to, first of all, have some connection to some radio station, and then the ads and the airtime and all this stuff. It's just that with the internet came this kind of incredible democracy of thought. Because who's calling the shots? I mean, in Rogan's case, it's got an insane listenership, and in Duncan's case, the same thing. And who's telling them what to do? No one. Like, it's beautiful. I mean, I just think that there's something so beautiful about how just that simplest of exchanges, just a conversation which is something that's been going on for time immemorial as far as we've been this part of the species, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now it can reach any number of people so long as they have an interest in finding out about what you're talking about, you know? So there too, like, I think that's very much in keeping with the Archaic revival. I think that just to take the thunder away from the powers that be that sort of held sway over everything for a very, very long time, still do in certain corners, but I feel like a big sort of like take back has started to occur in terms of potentiating the freedom for people to express themselves how they want, and for any number of little conversations starting up among people that then snowball into a bunch of other ones and so on.
Right. And then, as we said, you never know what comes from it. You know, you're completely right too. Like, nobody 10 years ago, 15 years ago, nobody, if I was like, hey, I want to start this radio show about creativity where we talk to artists about, people getting past their creative blocks, they would say, no, there's not enough people that would listen to that. That's the awesome thing about podcasting and really anything that you want to do on the internet, anything you can imagine, you can kind of create, and you will find an audience, large or small, and you can go as niche as you want. You can talk about Bitcoin, you could talk about trees, you could talk about anything you want, and there's going to be somebody there that's looking for that content, looking for people that are having those conversations that they would never encounter, somebody that is like-minded in their real life. And it's just the best, I think, way, like you're saying, with this revival, it's just the best way for us to kind of come together and realize really what's important and what matters to be communicated about.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, this has been awesome. Before we get to the final push, though, you mentioned your show. Can you tell us a little bit more details about that? That's in October, right?
Yeah, it's opening October 1st. It's at Corey Helford Gallery. I'll be making the announcement of the opening night and stuff on Instagram and Facebook and stuff. So if people follow me there, they can see it too. But anyone in LA, on October 1st, the opening's public reception, so you can just show up. It's 7 to 11 p.m. But yeah, the show, as I mentioned, I mean, that was kind of like the theme that I wanted to run with, which actually started last year. Last year I had a show in New York at Jonathan Levine Gallery that was kind of chapter one of an ongoing series, because I've really gone into just that idea, the Archaic revival, but not specifically McKenna, though. He's one of the huge sort of elders that I've followed as far as like that kind of a dialogue that's been going on. Like, he's been a huge inspiration, but just something that I feel is being championed by a lot of really sort of brave and cool people at the moment, who are working in various mediums, but a lot of like research that's being done into the psychedelic plants and that kind of thing, and how they are re-emerging out of nature to teach us a lot of things, and to start shedding the stigma and the dogma and this sort of like a demonized kind of perspective that our government has had on it for a very long time. Like, so I think that just starting to speak about that in my own kind of idiosyncratic way in my paintings, it's just been something I've been wanting to do for a while, but then last year with my show last year, and then this show definitely as well, I'm just seeing what I could do visually to kind of, again, allegorize that theme, just various angles. It's kind of like thinking of it as that as being like the big umbrella theme under which all the paintings are kind of these individual facets of it. And so far so good. I'm really happy with the new work. I haven't released much of it yet to the public. I think me and the gallery are we're holding our trigger fingers back a little bit to fully release them, but I've been doing a lot of like work in progress shots and stuff that people can see now. But yeah, a fair amount of large paintings. Also, I have, for this new show, I have my first two big bronze sculptures coming out. I worked with this foundry out in Arizona called Metal Physic, and they did a really, really good job, realizing my work into heavy duty, big bronzes, which is it's been a dream of mine for a very long time, but I didn't think that it would be something I could actually see into reality for a long time. I thought this would be some kind of like late career kind of move on my part, but it just happened. The stars kind of aligned and it worked out. So yeah, those are coming out for opening night. It's funny, I haven't actually even seen the finished bronze sculptures yet myself, but I will at my own opening, I guess. Because I was there all the way through like the clay process and all that, but little did I know how involved the process would be to actually turn a clay sculpture into a bronze. So all of that is pretty exciting. I'm really looking forward to this.
Very cool, man. Yeah, it's like, you said it'd be a late career thing, but when those like we were talking about before, when those opportunities come up, gotta grab them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Before we let you go, it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to kind of reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best words of advice and really push them to pursue their creative passions.
Okay. Well, I would say, whatever you do, I would advise just to do it because it's something you feel compelled to do for yourself. Again, like it's kind of a point I made a bit earlier, but I think it's an important one to stress, which is if there is to be an audience member that you're creating whatever it is you're creating for, if there is to be that kind of a person, let it just be yourself. Because I think that I often think so just to use the example of painting, which I'm most familiar with for myself, I like to think that my most successful paintings I've done are ones that I want to hang up on my own wall. And that's not, though it may sound this way, it's actually not this egomaniacal thing to say. I really think that, like, basically, like, fuck the phantom critics in your head that say you shouldn't do this or that because it's whatever, insert blank, it's outdated, it's cheesy, it's this or that or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's I think that to have sort of a pure dialogue with one's heart, as it were, like that's the part of art making that I think is the most important aspect of that process. It's really it's again, it's not the outcome of what happens when that piece is done. It's the process of making it itself that matters, at least to me. So I would just say, like, really, like, being true to oneself is at the heart of it, the main thing. But coupled with that too is to be patient with oneself. Getting to that state where the thing flows easy and you have I guess a kind of mastery over the medium, that takes a long time. It's not going to happen on the first try exactly how you want it to, maybe, but beautiful things can happen during that process. Even like often when you think you've made a mistake, the mistake ends up either teaching you something really valuable, or then the mistake ends up not being a mistake at all, but something that you didn't realize you had even made that mark. Let's say in painting, I'll often, alternative tools that are a little unconventional. Like I've been using a lot of palette knives, but also these weird blunt objects recently to apply the paint, just to see if this kind of clumsy instrument can make a mark that my brushes can't. And the truth of the matter is it really can. It really can transform to a large degree how the paint goes onto the canvas, and just by virtue of kind of like making it a little stranger for myself, moving the paint around and mixing the paint, it's actually yielded all these beautiful kind of happy mistakes for me, where now I've realized, like, oh, that's just another tool in my arsenal, that when I want a certain effect, I can turn to a thing that previously looked like it was just one mistake after another being applied. So again, it's just a matter of being curious, being open to making mistakes, and then realizing along the way that every one of those mistakes was actually somehow conducive to getting better at what it is that you're doing. So yeah, I think that would probably be it for now. Like, go on with other stuff, but
my man. No, it's good. It's embracing those mistakes and challenging yourself, but also being flexible to continue to grow. And I really like what you said about making something that you want to hang up. For podcasting, it's you're supposed to envision a quote avatar. It's that one person that you would want to be listening, that one person you're thinking about that's listening. And for me, that's me. Exactly. It's somebody who needs that inspiration. So I'm creating this podcast for me, and you're creating paintings for yourself. And I think people should write for themselves. People should write music for themselves. I think it's really important to do something that you love, and not what, like you said, fuck the critics, like screw what you think other people will think, make something that you will enjoy, and almost all the time, as a whole, more people will surround themselves with that and enjoy it because of it.
Yeah. You know what? One more thing I want to say to that, though, would be also, you know, by saying fuck the critic, I guess I also mean like the fuck the phantom critic that doesn't actually exist. But then it's also valuable, I think, to recognize good criticism when it comes one's way. Because I think that it would be a very counterproductive thing to kind of create a kind of armor around oneself, where if one has, let's say, trusted allies that can be open and candid with a person about what they're creating, I think that that's an extremely valuable thing to have. So I think that, you know, to take in whatever comments are coming in, still through the filter of like, well, you still know deep down inside what you want to do. But I think that, one can definitely get really important perspectives from other eyeballs looking at, let's say it's artwork, or if someone's creating music, like having somebody else listen to this stuff and just getting advice. Cause I think that, there too, like beautiful exchanges can happen, especially with people that you can then end up calling friends or peers in whatever craft it is that you're doing. Cause I think that, there's this big emphasis in certain niches of the art world, no matter what medium it is, that there's like this very competitive nature to it. But I personally don't believe in that dynamic. Like, I think that, in the limited time we have on Earth, like, I don't think our energy is being spent competing with one another is necessarily the most conducive. But rather, I think just having a nice exchange with people, I think that's really what matters. And I think sometimes that exchange does come with constructive criticism. So, you know, just finding other people that share the kind of love for whatever one's doing, and then being able to start up chats with them where, you know, you can be honest with their work and they can be honest with yours. There will be times when what you hear the advice might be to change something one's done or whatnot. But I think that, not all criticism is a bad thing. In fact, a lot of it can be a really, really helpful thing. But, yeah, the idea is not to get too thick skinned either way, to be resistant to criticism or, you know, I just think that being objective, basically to be objective sometimes about what one's doing is, it's a healthy way of moving forward.
Yeah, screw the inner critics, but definitely if you're able to find that voice of somebody else that you trust that knows kind of what they're talking about, to really embrace that and to also be, you know, that spirit of abundance of trying to help them as well. Like, I think it's really important.
Totally.
Martin, man, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Yeah, no, hey, thanks, Owen. This is great.
Powerful episode. Fans of Joe Rogan will appreciate that. So many good things in these 2 episodes. But I really like what he said towards the end there about trying new things, just to try, you know, to attempt to get unexpected results or even mistakes that might surprise you. I think a lot of times we fall back into our old habits, the things that we know that work with whatever it is that we do. And like Martin was talking about how art and creativity brings to his life surprise, and how spicing it up can keep it fresh, but it also can help you to progress and to evolve as an artist, as a creative person, whatever your pursuit is, to actually attempt to do something off. Something that you think might 90% of the time result in a mistake. Just see what happens. You know, it might not be a huge waste of time. It might be a waste of time, but you might learn something new, and you might actually find something insanely profound out by keeping it fresh and by trying something completely new. So try doing that. And also, if you are interested in Terrence McKenna or psychedelics or the Archaic revival, I just have to say that you have to listen to at least some of his lectures. Just type Terrence McKenna into YouTube. Doing so might change your life. Doing so for me did changed my life. Listening to Terrence McKenna, listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, listening to Joe Rogan talk to Duncan Trussel, and listening to Duncan Trussel's podcast. If you're interested in hearing Martin talk to Duncan Trussel, he was on his podcast as well. Highly recommend it. We'll have that linked up at the show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/150 or 151, or yourcreativepush.com/Martin Wittfooth. That's MartinWittfooth. There's an H at the end there. Also, definitely check out Martin's stuff. His art is insane. It will make you think about life. It will make you not just think about the animals that are there. It will just make you, it'll put you in a different place. So definitely check that out. We'll have some on the show notes page, or you can just head to martinwittfooth.com. Again, there's an H at the end, but you can head to the show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/150, to easily click that link. On Instagram, Martin's Mars Project, MARS Project, and he's Martin Wittfooth on Facebook. That's all I got for you today. On Monday, we have a really cool episode lined up with my man Spio. He's an Austrian musician that is awesome, and it's a really good kind of segue from this episode into that one, because he is currently in college creating music, but also still pursuing his degree. And I think it was really interesting to kind of have that episode up next because of our discussion about just college in the Western world and how young people have to make decisions so quickly, and that can sometimes lead to losing your art. So really interesting conversation with a really talented musician on Monday. But until then, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. It's nice to be talking to you here in the middle of your weekend. That's unusual for us, but hopefully you are smack dab in the middle of some creative, amazing pursuits. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, and we will see you on Monday if you need the push again. I love you all. Bye-bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.